All right. Welcome to the Demand Gen Summit, Spring 2022. Loved hearing from Billy. Today, I've got Gabe, the legend Larsen, speaking with us. I've known Gabe for a long time. Right now, he is an head of marketing at a division at Meta, formerly Customer. Super excited about the event. I'm sure you heard some of the stats from Billy, but over 4,000 attendees. You've got speakers from obviously Meta, from Salesforce.com, from Domo, from G2, from Demandbase, 6sense. I mean, some of the top companies in the world around marketing and marketing strategy. Today, super excited to have Gabe join us. So let me give you a little bit of background on Gabe. As I said, I've known him for a while, so I know some of his dirty secrets. We'll share some of those later. It depends on how many comments we get, and if we get some good love, I'll start revealing it all. But Gabe, so again, as way of background, has worked at Goldman Sachs, has worked as a strategy consultant, has run marketing teams, has run consulting teams. Currently runs, again, the marketing at one of the B2B divisions of Meta, and honestly has helped this organization that just got acquired, right? I mean, you guys, your organization, Customer, was just acquired recently, and you guys have had an insane meteoric growth, right? I mean, well over 100%. I mean, we can't say the numbers, but dramatically more than 100% growth rate over the last several years as you've kind of led on the marketing side, that growth rate. I mean, it's pretty staggering. Really, I want to, again, welcome, Gabe. Thank you for doing this. You've got, I'm sure, lots of free time trying to manage the transition and the acquisition and trying to run the organization there. But before we get into too much, I think a lot, you've hosted a podcast with thousands, tens of thousands of viewers. But tell us something that people don't know about you.
Yeah, well, you hit the podcast one, Dave. But first and foremost, thank you for having me. It's always fun to be on and talk shop when it comes to marketing. So I do have a secret hobby. I love podcasting. Currently run something called the Customer Service Secrets Podcast. In the past, I've done sales, but what most people don't know about me is part of my consulting journey led me to Saudi Arabia. I spent about 4 years in the Middle East running transformation programs for Toyota out of Riyadh and Jeddah. So that's always a kind of an interesting fact.
That is an interesting fact. Did you take family there?
Yeah, I almost ruined my marriage. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, sorry, a little sensitive, right?
No, it was meant to be a 6-month, what do they call those, stretch assignment type of things, and it turned into about 5 years in between Saudi Arabia and Dubai. And so yeah, we had my wife finally came out, and I did have one child out there.
That's amazing. That's very, very cool. Thank you for sharing. So let's get into some of what's going on right now. So the topic here is we really want to talk about marketing in the current market environment, in the current economy. And there's a lot of crazy stuff happening, but there was one stat I was just, as I was thinking about, interviewing you today, that I wanted to really get into, that I found. And it's a study just recently published by Ernst & Young. It was in, I think, February of this year. And it's that the venture investment has actually broken for the last 2 years new records. So last year alone, there was $350 billion invested, and that's more than double the previous year. And just last quarter, it was 85 billion invested. So, pardon me, and you'll have to forgive me, guys. I've like everybody, I'm just getting over COVID, which is why I'm in my studio, kind of away from everybody.
No, we're just glad you're here with us, Dave. I'm glad you're recovering or on the road to recovery.
So look, it's not in one industry, it's across every industry. You're talking consumer goods, you're talking, obviously tech, but health and life sciences, energy, consumer services, finance, industrials. So what that means from my point of view, is as marketers, we're faced with more competition than we ever have. So you've got this context where everyone's celebrating this new economy of how great it is. And look, there's some good that's clearly come out of COVID. Not this, but there's some good, but there's some challenges. What are some of the things you're seeing, Gabe?
Man, I love that one because it goes right to the heart of the problem. I mean, if you're doubling the VC dollars in, that just means competition, to your point, is everywhere. And we see it in our business. I'm sure others see it. And I've felt that uptick. A couple other things that jump out to me, because there was that boom. There was a great study McKinsey did. They talked about this idea of revenge spending, I think. And it was this idea of post-pandemic spending in the consumer world was just going to be a boom. And in a lot of industries, we felt that. In our industry, I think in particular, where we do customer service software for a lot of the B2C companies across the world. But there's something that seems to be softening in that space, right? That boom, that revenge spend seems to be tailoring off. And we're seeing that, I think, in the market. The market seems to be softening. Tech stocks are definitely taking a dip.
Destroyed. Honestly, the tech market is destroyed. It's down another 2 or 3% today.
So I think there was this time of boom. And truthfully, that also aligns with this great resignation idea, right? So we also experienced coming through that pandemic, this, I saw a Forbes article, I think it was in 2021, 50 million people nearly switching jobs because of that boom. But a lot of my peers, a lot of the conversations I'm having is that there seems to be maybe a softening there as well. In addition, inflation, right? I mean, you and I were chatting the other day that even tech companies are starting to say, hey, if gas prices are
raising prices, right?
Yeah, maybe I need to take my seat price, and maybe that needs to be increased 5 to 10%, right? So that's another element. So multiple elements, I think, playing a role in just, wow, this interesting environment we find ourselves in.
What about the remote worker component? Are you seeing that affect Meta or your team and other marketing teams you're talking to?
I mean, Meta's a large organization, so I'll talk more broadly. It just sounds like, as I talk to friends and peers, that we're in this limbo state where for a while we knew we were going to be remote, and then many companies wanted to push people back to the office, and there was some interesting happenings there. And now it's confusing. Are we remote? Are we in person? Are we 2 days a week? Are we 3 days a week? And I got to admit, most companies are not in a place for the hybrid, and it's causing headaches. This idea of 10 people standing around a TV or sitting around a table and then looking at 2 people remote, that's not the future of collaboration. Like, that is not going to work. And, people used to feel remote and kind of alone on an island in kind of the pre-pandemic worlds. And I just feel like we're still battling this. Are we remote, in person? And it's hampering a collaboration. It's hampering productivity. And I think a lot of companies are still yet to figure out, how the hell do we do this?
Well, and what else is interesting is, like, for a while we saw the remote, video, Zoom and, companies like that go on a big boom. But like, just being on a call together is not enough to actually get work done remotely. So we have seen like an emergence of additional tools, and we're seeing, Asana in public. Like, there's a bunch of new technology that's helping us go beyond just having this conversation, right?
It is. And I think we'll continue to see more. I think the collaboration space, as a side note, you've got in person, and then you've got, I sit at a screen and look at people all day. There's something else. There's something in between that I think we'll continue to figure out. So excited to see new innovations in the collaboration space. But, the last thing I'll say is, with all that is going on in this space, it doesn't change. It doesn't change the marketer's mission. My boss says it. I'm sure your boss says it. You got to hit your number. You still have to grow. Companies want to experience that 100% year-over-year growth, or that triple, double, as our friend Neeraj at Battery says. They still want that fast growth despite everything that's happening. Now, the one advantage many companies, I think, have Is it because we're coming out of that boom and VC money was apparent and somewhat free flowing? A lot of companies actually have a decent amount of cash on hand. But the challenge is complex environment, cash on hand, numbers growing as they always have. Where do we go from here?
Well, and you had a conversation you shared with your boss specifically, where you just came out of one of the fastest growing trends in technology, and as a result, Meta decided, push forward out of a huge competition of lots of other people in your space. It's not like your space is like void of other competitors. Yet, because of that growth rate, at least in part, Meta made the acquisition. Yet, despite that, you had a conversation with your boss. Share, because you shared it with me. I think everybody would love to hear this.
Yeah. I think this could be
unbelievable growth. Yet, go ahead. Sorry.
This could be like a bumper sticker for marketing leaders, or a stamp it on a coffee mug. It's kind of what have you done for me today type of thing, right? And so, despite I think some of the amazing things this entire company has accomplished, we like you've got to hit even bigger numbers. And the conversations I continually have is great. I'm glad we've done that, and I'm glad we did that. Past tense, passing. Where are we going? What are you doing today? How do you get from here to there? And the numbers, as I think we all know, they're not getting smaller, they're getting bigger. They're getting bigger.
And I think for everybody at this event, they're trying to solve that very same problem. I think that is the incumbent problem that has not gone away, and it's actually just gotten worse. So, again, how do you hit numbers regardless of how good you've done? You mentioned this. It's not necessarily do it cheaper, but it's how do you hit numbers? You have budget to do this, but there's diminishing returns in all of the different marketing channels that we're all trying to pursue. So what's your recipe? Give us some, let's get into the meat of this. What do people do that, again, it's an impossible task, more competition. How do you stand out? Maybe you've done great, maybe you've not done great, but regardless, you got to do more. Let's get into it. What's your advice?
Yeah, well, if I had a crystal ball, I'd tell you exactly how to do it, but I don't. But here's a couple things that we've been cooking on, I've seen in other companies, and I wanted to share a few things that I do feel like you ought to have on your radar. One thing I'm seeing, Dave, is this resurgence of a little more of almost a reawakening of the concept of good old brand awareness and marketing. I don't know. I've read some books, but they're older, around positioning and messaging and brand awareness. And when I was starting my career, a lot of SaaS CMOs, in my opinion, seemed to have that background that was a little more brand awareness messaging. In the last years, I feel like there's been a movement to more of a demand-focused CMO, or somebody who's more revenue-focused. And I'm telling you, just in the last little bit, that resurgence of brand and awareness is coming back, and the age-old principles. Again, some great books out there to check out, but you've got to find a way to stand out in this messy crowd. And you hit the stat. I think the VC thing says it all. Nothing to say beyond that. You're doubling the amount of dollars into the market, and you're trying to run the same old plays to stand out, and you take away all, in some cases for marketers, event budgets have been 30 to 50%. I know they're coming back online, but I visit them. They're not back online. So don't kid yourself that you can go back to spending for your brand and events 30 to 50% of your budget. So, whoa, how do we stand out when all that's happening? And I think this resurgence of brand marketing is coming, and it's coming fast.
So it's you bring up an interesting point. Traditionally, the way we connect with other people often as marketers is we have a big event marketing budget,
Totally.
right? So we're going to go meet with people. We stand out by actually having relationships. We can actually have conversations. But right now, in fact, there's an interesting stat that said, depending on your category, events are 55% to 30% behind what they were in 2019. So we're not there. You just went to an event recently, right? Tell me about that thing.
Yeah, look, I think for every industry it's slightly different, but we've got to monitor this closely as marketers because I do think events have to play a role in some form or fashion. But we went to an event down in Texas, and it was just interesting to see a little bit of the facade, I'd say, meaning, from an event standpoint, it was pushed on so the
Yeah.
event was pushing on social. It made it look like it was New Year's, in New York City. I mean, parties and everything going on, but it was one of those fire festival type. Maybe that's a little dramatic, but a little bit of that going on where cool on social, but for the people there, they're like, hey, this is mostly vendors, and the pictures they're taking are clumps of groups because over here there's nobody.
Yeah.
And so in our space, look, it's there and it's coming. I think you got to be smart about it, but it's not 2018, it's not, early 2019. It's far from it. And I think a lot of us were relying pretty heavily for our brand and awareness concept on that. And that's gone. That's absolutely gone in so many ways.
So there's a little bit of that art. You're right. There's been, and this is the Demand Gen Summit, but the art of product messaging and differentiation, I wouldn't say has been lost, but it's been neglected, right? I mean,
Yeah, I do. I think it's been, and it is a concept of key category ideas. Number one, you have to have a message that is differentiated. And my advice here is I see a lot of product marketers, and I'm not saying this is wrong, but I love that quote. I think it was Henry Ford. He said something like, if I would have asked my customers what they wanted, they said, just give me a faster horse.
yeah.
It's always a great line, but look, you can't listen to your customers or potential customers when trying to innovate. Use their feedback to iterate. And I feel like a lot of times we go too far down that path. I'm going to try to come up with this exciting new message. And what you come out with is a faster horse. And you're seeing the sea of sameness across so many different companies. So I think that's one challenge on one side. On the flip side, I think a lot of people are getting so fancy on this category creation stuff. It makes me want to throw up sometimes. Look, I'm no expert at it, so it's hard to point fingers. But if I see a website and it's a new category every 6 months, it's like, look, the category creation framework, it makes sense, but you got to be careful not to overplay it. So it does start with the unique message. And that's up often to the founder and that head of product marketing, especially in small companies, to come up with something that is unique and different. So that's one principle. A couple other things I want to hit on, then you can jump in. The second thing is, especially in small companies, I really love this idea that people or consumers or businesses, they don't just follow companies, they follow people. You can't get away from thought leadership. I know it's been a while now, but companies like Gong, boy, did they built their back off some of that original thought leadership. And if you're not getting that value to customers, I think you're missing a big boat, but you need to find somebody. You need to find that voice in the company that becomes somebody that people can relate to and follow. It's a big trend in B2C. You see that, and I'm going to mention that often because, Dave, I still think B2C and B2B, we can learn so much from B2C companies. And a lot of them do a great job in getting a poster child, getting somebody that you can relate to. And that's everybody from, the founder to celebrities, right? But boy, do they get somebody good that's human. And it's not just about follow my company, airline X, Y, and Z. It's follow, Mr. Star Trek, right? So that's an example, but you can do it in B2C and B2B. But I love when people find ways to provide value, thought leadership, and get somebody that they can relate to. People don't just follow companies, they follow people. So thought leadership isn't going away, and value-based is here to stay.
So are you suggesting like we go back to the sponsor, the Super Bowl kind of thing? Like how far do we go?
I think you've got to push the limits. There are companies, tech companies we've heard about it who are doing Super Bowl ads. Right. There's a couple of companies who are doing, I was just watching the NBA playoffs last night and saw a B2B tech company in the NBA playoffs. What?
It's like, this is like the .com, like 1999, like 2000 again.
Look, and part of that is because I do think we have some money. So you're able to, I don't want to say throw it away, but throw it out bigger. Now, the advantage that we have is you can never go untargeted, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people, especially B2B tech, are saying commercials, what there's a lot more you can do. You ought to get on the phone. Maybe that's one takeaway to think about. You ought to just jump on the phone if you're a B2B head of marketing. Have a conversation with one of these agencies who are specializing in, and I'm just talking about commercial ads for a moment, but learn a little bit about it. I've been surprised over the past couple of years of how much targeting you can do, city-based, demographic-based. They've got more than you think. And truthfully, you can even take it one layer down. Some of these streaming platforms like Hulu even take that to a whole nother level. Now, that's more broad-based, and not everyone can do that, because as a marketer, as soon as you take a budget for a Super Bowl ad, you sure as hell better have some sort of targeting principle, justification, or ROI. We're not in B2C, so you can't do math. But I'm saying, take the conversation. You might be surprised at how much targeting you can do in some of these older platforms. And Dave, that goes as well for some of those things like print, physical. We used to love to do, the city takeover when there was a big event. And I'm not saying that's still a play for certain industries, but you can work with companies and dive into some of those older mediums, and you can get some good targeting.
They stand out.
They stand out. So I think there's a place for those, absolutely. But there are mediums that are non-traditional that you can jump on. One that I still love, and probably because I'm a closet podcaster, but damn, the podcasts. If you're not advertising on podcasts, shame on you. There's so many out there that can be part of your target market, big, small. I think that's a no-brainer. It certainly will reach its point of probably poor return on spend, but there are different categories like that
right now.
Targeted a niche, right?
It's so underinvested. There's so many you can target. There's EV car podcasts. There's tennis shoe, like literally any target you want, you can find, and they're generally under supported right now. So there's still an arbitrage there.
I think that's a fun one. So look, those would be some of the things, and I want to start there because I do feel like it's fun, this brand marketing reawakening or awakens from the dead type of concept. It's here, right? It's coming. So
let's move on to more traditional demand gen type stuff. What's your next kind of pillar of advice?
Yeah, I do think I'm hearing different words for it. Growth marketing. I've loved this term that a couple of people have told me about lately, perpetual demand funnel. In the past, it was like a high velocity machine. I don't know. I think people in general are starting to talk about this a little more because we as marketing leaders are feeling like we got to squeeze all the juice out of that orange. We can't let things fall through the cracks. And there seems to be, again, a re-emphasis on this idea of I've got to build a perpetual demand funnel. And I like the term because it's just, you kind of set it up and you optimize the crap out of it, and it starts to feeds the beast. It kind of starts to run on its own a little bit, and it doesn't take the head count. Because Dave, I feel like as the market softens, the head count's going to be I think that's usually the thing that goes first. So if you don't have that machine,
no doubt,
you're relying on John Doe and Mary to run all these different parts, you're going to run into a problem. So I feel like people are redoubling down on, we got to get that foundational element.
So let's double click on this, this marketing machine that you're describing. This, is it automation? So you're saying less bodies, more automation. And if that's the case, how do you deal with personalization?
Yeah, I mean, we should get into maybe let's touch on personalization next, because I think that is, I wanted to touch on this concept of ABM a little bit if we have time, and personalization I think plays a role into that. But on your first point, just on the machine building, yes, you have to have a holistic concept, a catcher's net, a catcher's mitt, if you will, using a little baseball analogy for you, that can catch all this demand coming from your brand awareness campaigns. And it's got to be able to handle it in a way that is just rocking and rolling. And so you got to have nurture tracks. You got to have, you need to have retargeting. So all the marketing stuff that I think fits into that. But a couple principles I've found that are extremely important is it comes to this perpetual demand principles, not tactics. Ping me offline and we can go into tactics as part of that content framework. You got to map your process. You got to have SLAs through the whole thing. So I'm a process map junkie. I love it. I love that stuff. But principles, just for a minute, on this perpetual demand engine, you can get caught up in the tactics or the stuff I was just mentioning.
Yeah.
You got to remember this principle of your best defense. I'm watching the NBA game, so I've got some sports.
A little heavy on the basketball analogy.
Well, I had that one story. I got to digress for a minute where I got to tell you this quick story, and then we'll get back to this day. But I'm working with you and the team, and I'm in Boston at this company, and I'm telling this guy about a basketball story, like I was telling you. And I made him believe that I was some like college player, and I did something great. I did spruce the truth a little bit. Anyway, somewhere in the story I mentioned it was a high school basketball story. I got to tell you, he just literally got on the ground and was rolling around. He said, "How dare you tell me a basketball analogy of you playing high school basketball?" So anyways, I do got to be careful.
So everybody should take a little bit of what you share with a grain of salt. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah.
So you don't actually work at Med. You work at Med.
That's right.
I'm joking.
That's right. I'm more of a couch potato basketball player now. But anyways, this concept, we digress. This concept of your best defense is a good offense.
Yeah.
Focus on the North Star. You can get in the tactics and the measurements and the content framework and the nurture, but you are able to get stuff through that machine, and you're producing pipeline. Keep the eye on the prize, because boy, you can get into the details.
And what is the prize then? Like, just is it MQLs? Is it?
No, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do think we still struggle in marketing with false positives, right?
Yeah,
and
totally.
I think we got to step up to the plate and say, you know what, we're adults now, and the prize is revenue. If you want to go one step back, I'd be open to that conversation and like qualified pipeline. But anytime we get caught in that MQL conversation, it's leading indicators. It's absolutely important. Touches, appointments set. One thing I often feel like I get in conversations with my own team on, with some peers teams, is I've done some sessions, is this idea of, oh man, we're running this campaign and it's got a ton of meetings, but then you see that false positive where meetings aren't turning into pipe, and it's like, hey, we got to watch out for that. So I do think you got to, be an adult on that and watch out for false positives, because they're everywhere. Start with the end in mind and back up.
So that growth marketing, build a machine, really drive to like the actual North Star, which is revenue, and build automation, and basically kind of keep the right thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What's your next pillar for people?
Man, you're running me through it, right?
We're going.
I think just this ABM concept, I think there's something around ABM that we either need to kind of transition or transform. And so whether you want to call it ABM 2.0 or I still think this fits nicely with actually the perpetual demand engine we were just talking about, but I like to break it out because there's been so much focus on ABM. And I got to admit, you talk to marketers and it's, oh, ABM is so important to unifying sales. And, oh, ABM is how modern companies do GTM, and ABMs are one-to-one method and our one-to-few. And you hear all these things, but honestly, Dave, when I follow up with people on ABM, and I'm saying my peers and friends, 6-12 months after they launch some sort of program, I'm telling you, I hear answers like, Gabe, ABM, it's just a long play, so you're not going to see ROI. Or, our ABM tool turned out to be just a fancy ad targeting tool, or ABM was really just a general marketing program, and it doesn't quite turn out to what people want. And so I really, in some ways, I've just been getting frustrated, but I think we need to see a little bit of an evolution on this.
Well, let me ask a question. And this, like I ask people this all the time. What is ABM to you?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have some sort of definition that I wrote down. I actually created a definition for my team to see if we could help kind of all align on it. But I like the idea of it's a targeted program that's in partnership with multiple functions across the organization to create qualified demand and ultimately revenue for the company. It's a more of a general term, and I'm okay with the high level concept because I think people got stuck on it, and it is just a good marketing program. And the place I think they got stuck on it was, I don't want to blame tech companies for this, but sometimes I wonder, they get stuck a lot on the tools.
They do.
It's almost as if, and excuse if anybody's listening from, I won't name companies, but it's almost like you had a couple ABM vendors sit down. They've never run a marketing or sales org, and it's something like, why don't we give marketers intent data, call it ABM, and then watch them do nothing with it? Or maybe we'll build a BI tool that allows marketers and salespeople to see their funnel, and then we're going to call that ABM and sell it for double the price. Like, there was something with the tools that started to kind of put us down the wrong path. Sorry, I get a little passionate.
I gotta say though, it's not. I'm going to bail out the tech companies for a second, as you'd expect me to. But it's the marketers. Like, we as marketers often will default to tools when we don't have the right strategy to move forward. So we're like, oh, I need ABM. It's the cool thing to have. I don't know if ABM is just high impact mailers, or if it's analytics, or if it's intent data, but I'm going to go buy something so I can show my boss that I've got an ABM solution in place. Now, I think some of these tech vendors, the technology is amazing. Like, it's truly stunning. Like, there is this inequality between the information a buyer has and the information a seller has. Buyers know way more about us. And especially post-COVID, where we're spending as buyers so much time online and buying and researching. And then you think about a marketer, someone comes to your website, what do you know? I mean, with some of the intent data, the company, maybe some of the activity, but there is this inequality that technology can help solve, but great technology doesn't solve a bad strategy.
And it's funny because, as a marketer, I like to blame the tools, kind of like you're saying. It's not my problem that I use the tools inappropriate. It's the stupid company.
No, we need
that is fair, but ultimately, I'm kind of done with the ABM term, and I do think you want to have an intent-based prospecting program or an intent-based marketing program as part of that perpetual demand funnel. And my high-level advice, without getting into too much tactics, is, again, it's a core component. It's a pillar of the program, but it's not. The whole program is a perpetual demand funnel. It's growth marketing. It's ABM, or account-based marketing. But to help marketers actually do something valuable from it, it starts with an intent-based program, identifying your dark funnel, understanding those anonymized visitors on your website, third-party intent from industry terms, or G2 crowd type of stuff, sales interactions, and then making use of that. Think how you can take your dark funnel and really turn it into a full funnel, rather than what you currently know, which is, again, MQLs coming on your website. You tap into that and you have a full-scale program around it.
That's money.
Like, that's something interesting there.
That's super. And if you can identify your ICP, your ideal customer profile, and then engage with those kind of companies, and use that intent data to have like a more, BCG just published, we had BCG speak, I think a time or two back, about, they call it ABE, account-based engagement, not ABM, where that's kind of they're saying we need to do more than just, send out messaging. We need to engage in a meaningful, personalized way. Like, actually, buyers are giving us a lot of signals if we just listen to them.
Yeah. So, right. You can get into the details, but it's signal-based marketing, intent-based marketing. Something like that as a marketer. And look, maybe I'm just a simpleton, but when I think about an ABM program, it sometimes feels overwhelming. But when you're like, we've got to run a program, a webinar program, a field event program, a signals-based program, my mind can go, oh, got it. Yeah. So I think you got to break it down a little bit. And then the last thing on ABM is, if your boss comes to you and says, are you running an ABM program or something, just tell him to not. Tell him or her to just back off. I hate.
I'm glad you filtered there. Congratulations. That was a good move. Hey, look, we only have about 5 minutes left, but I want to see if I can pick your brain a little bit on some of the channels that are working now that maybe weren't working, or like, what are some of, not so far into the tactics, but look, there's a portfolio of marketing channels that people can use. What what advice do you give folks on kind of new channels or channels that they ought to be considering that maybe they haven't been?
Yeah, I think on the new channel, this is just something that we as marketers have to keep on our radar. I think the first thing to mention, anytime you start saying, new stuff, you do need to be a little bit careful. I love that phrase, companies don't starve, they drown, right? So there is
Yeah.
a time where you can just, it's the squirrel thing, right? Any new shiny thing, we kind of jump to it. It's the tool problem you mentioned. So I'd caution as we kind of just start that conversation. But generally speaking, we've got to be on top of the trends.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm hearing more B2B peers doing is messaging channels. It's fascinating in our space, and this relates very much to customer and customer service. You got to meet the consumer where they are. If somebody, and again, I'm talking customer service for a minute, but if someone wants to use WhatsApp to contact your company and talk to them about products on the website, or they got questions or problems with an order, guess what? You need to have like a fully functioning channel of WhatsApp. And so my first advice is really trying to figure out where your target audience is, find those channels that work, and be open to some of these modern messaging channels. B2B companies jumping into Instagram, jumping into Messenger, finding ways to double down on some of the B2C channels. And again, it might not be 100% for demand gen. This might have to fall a little bit more into your advertising budget as a retargeting or something like that. But don't be afraid of those traditional B2C. Crack the code. You can do it. I know some people on your team are saying you can't. Tell them you can. Figure that out. So I think that's one interesting area. The other is just as we get more visual, audio, visual, video. I don't think we've cracked the code. I mean, you look at reels and video capabilities for companies, TikTok. Yeah, that's not going away.
That's interesting. B2B TikTok. I mean, and you talk about podcasts also, right? So you're saying leverage the remote ability to connect with people more personally.
I just think you got, it's something that we shouldn't be ignoring. I don't know if I'd go all in on it. That's why I kind of said companies don't starve, they drown. But you should be aware of it. You should be thinking about it. And I know companies are starting to make great strides B2B in some of those channels that you were like, what? I thought that was a B2C channel. Okay. Well, I mean, one trend you always got to watch, whatever B2C is doing, B2B will do 5 to 7 years later. That's just how it works here.
No, it's true. Well, look, this has been amazing. And again, we're about out of time. If you were to just take a couple of minutes and give some parting advice, like what are the key takeaways here? And how do they go back after today's event and be a better marketer?
I mean, first and foremost, I'd just say, what's the best way to frame it? It's, I'm thinking of something empathetic. It's like, I hear you, I thank you, don't think your effort is going unnoticed. It is extremely difficult to operate in your environment. It's often an underappreciated role. It's just produce pipeline. I mean, the beautiful thing about marketing and the curse of marketing is product marketing, corporate marketing, customer marketing, demand marketing, ops marketing. The list goes on and on. And so to be the best at all of that is extremely difficult. And then the environment that we talked about, wow. So keep your head up, keep going, because honestly, we're all in it to win it, and you're doing a fantastic job. So just, again, I try to say that as authentic as I can, because I've talked to you, I feel it myself. It's hard, but keep going. So that's one. Secondly, you do need to recognize always that the times change. We had maybe a boom. We might be going into something slightly different. Because we're going into something slightly different, you got to iterate, you got to adjust. And I think a couple of those key areas we talked about are going to be really important. How do you stand out in that sea of sameness? Can you get your brand and awareness to reawaken in a way that it had back in the 80s or in the 70s or in the 60s? What does that perpetual demand engine look like? What are those core components to make sure that you have, good defense, but you got to get a good offense? And then lastly, ABM, it can be distracting, but there's core components of it for your strategy, intent, signals. They can make a difference, and it's worth taking some time to do that. So those would be a couple of the core components I'd leave you with.
All right. Well, look, it's been amazing. A little bit of insight into the madness of Gabe Larsen. We appreciate you taking some time. Again, as you learn more things, we'll post some of your insights. How do people connect with you if they want to reach out after the event?
Man, I've been busier than I've ever been, so I'm a little lackluster. I got to get back on my LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is still the place to go. Find me, and I'd love to chat.
All right, you're amazing, Gabe. Thank you for doing this. We have lots of amazing speakers, I think, throughout the rest of the day. Thank you for attending the event, and again, reach out to Mr. Larsen if you guys have any specific questions. But thanks for attending. Thanks, Gabe.